What's good, everybody? Seriously, podcasting has changed the way we do business. Now, I'm not going to go and talk about a bunch of podcasts that have gotten 200, 400 million, whatever crazy, deals and contracts there, because those are huge outliers. We're going to talk about podcasts on a scale that's having real impact on real small businesses, real entrepreneurs every single day. And that is specifically podcasting that is for marketing your business. Whether you are the podcaster, you own the podcast network, you are working with podcasters to do your advertising. Seriously, podcasting is an essential channel for marketing, advertising, and branding of any business nowadays. And once ad dollars get involved, which we saw quite a few years ago from all these bigger corporations, bigger networks, that's when it becomes big business, and advertising dollars are flowing heavily over into the podcast space, and it's only getting bigger. Don't let anyone fool you. Like when people talk about saturation, all these, but don't let anyone fool you. Okay. Because you have to keep something in mind. For every one podcast, you have almost 10 to 15 blogs that are active. Okay. And blogs are still making people money. So podcasting hasn't even scratched the surface of it. The best thing is that you don't have to be signed to a big network. You don't have to be a part of one of these big stations or one of these big contracts to make a podcast and to make a podcast a business. You don't have to be. You can do it all on your own. You can do it from your office, your garage, a small, conference room, hell, your bedroom, your living room. It doesn't matter. And the best way to market your brand could just very well be the podcast you haven't started yet. So today we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about starting a podcast, kicking it off, how people have used podcasts for their business, and the different type of businesses you can use it for. Let's get it. What's up and what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ambition Show podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Muhammad, and today we're diving into the game-changing and it's still growing world of podcasting, specifically for entrepreneurs and small business owners, using podcasting as a marketing tool. If you ever thought about starting a podcast before, but weren't sure where you start, wasn't sure exactly how it could benefit you, then definitely this is the episode for you. And we're going to break it down in a few key areas, the basics of podcasting. Now we have an entire episode, we have an entire episode over on my YouTube channel about podcasting and getting started just in general, whether the pod is for something creative, it's not for a business necessarily, it's just something you want to do as a hobby. Some really basics of podcasting, but we're going to get into the one-on-one of podcasting as a business. But then entrepreneurs who are podcasting, entrepreneurs who are seeing success and how they're leveraging podcasting, and then how you can start a podcast yourself. So let's get into podcast 101 as a business for a small business owner. What is podcasting? Okay, so for those of you guys and it's understandable, there's a lot of concepts, there's a lot of content out there, there's a lot of different information out there. And you may be wondering what exactly is podcasting. Maybe it's new to you. Perfectly fine. I can tell you right now, it is always a challenge when you're explaining to somebody, I'm working on a podcast, and they're kind of looking at you like, is it like a radio show? And that's cool. That's all right. Everybody got, everybody got a different level of information, in the background. That's cool. Well, we're going to start them out like a pup. We talked about this before. Crawl, walk, run, right? Then we get to a nice sprint, and then we got to stop and drink some Gatorade. Okay. Gatorade, don't sue me. I'm saying I like your drink. It's not an advertisement for you. Please don't sue me. I don't have that kind of money. Gatorade has a lot of money. Big pockets. Anywho, simply put, podcasting is just an audio-based form of content, right? It's a content format that is very similar to radio. It's very similar to a radio show, but it allows you to share your expertise via an audio platform. Now, the cool part about this is that you don't have to have old school radio. You can access a podcast from your laptop, your desktop, your phone, and there's so many different platforms for you to do so. It's absolutely amazing how many people you can reach if you have a podcast. Think of it as the modern day radio show, but with total control over the content and distribution. See, there's a significant difference, because I've brought this up before about how podcasts is similar to radios, or I should say specifically radio shows. But have you ever heard of things like pirate radio? You know, old school pirate radio, where people didn't have the broadcast antenna. They didn't have the frequency. So they would either have to tap into another frequency. They would have to find one that wasn't being used. Well, podcasting, there's no barrier, truly. It's literally you and your recorder, your voice recorder, and then you upload it into either a distribution service, or you can create your own feed, an RSS feed, right, from your podcast, just like you can do if you've ever heard of those for your blog, right? That is the awesome part about a podcast. It doesn't have that barrier of entry, and this is also why it has become the next big wave of content creation, because the barrier of entry is completely gone. Now, the barrier of distribution is still there. We'll get into that in a second. So unlike, and I brought up pirate radio for a moment, but unlike Bill Simmons' suggestion, who's of course one of the pod fathers who are out there, Christian Slater did not create podcasting and pump up the volume. All right. So for my 35s and ups out there, if y'all remember that movie, Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater, yeah, no, he didn't create this. No. But just like everything else with the internet, the idea was removing gatekeepers, removing barriers, and creating opportunities for people who just had an idea to get something out there. And that's why podcasting is so accessible as it is. So jump on your voice recorder, put it in your phone, or if you have a little bit more technology, get a good headset, some mics, hook it up to your computer, record your voice, and then literally go to this site and you create an RSS feed. There's tons of ways to create podcasts. That's why I say there's no true gatekeeper. It's up to you what you want to do with it. But why is it so powerful? Well, audio is personal. Think about when you hear a song, or when you think of an artist that you like to hear. Unlike social media posts, you know what I mean, where our complete attention on that never-ending scroll, it's hard to get, right? Because you scroll past. It takes some time to sit down and listen to some audio. But at the same time, when you're thinking about maybe having it in the background, like me, I know you're just like me in this case. Whether it's a song, it's a radio show, it's even a TV show. When we hear something, even if we have it in the background, when we hear something, it clicks, it connects with us. And just like a radio show, when you're at work, when you're deep into thought, working on a task, and you need a quick break, you need a quick mental break, sometimes popping on a podcast is the best way to do it, because it doesn't take your full attention like sitting down reading a book where you really want to delve into the book. Whether you have a physical trade paperback or you're looking at it on a tablet or your phone or your computer. No, it doesn't pull your attention away like a movie because you're watching the movie. You could just have that audio going on a train ride, on a bus ride, while you're in the back of an Uber, in between lunch break. You know what I'm saying? Maybe working out. I know a lot of people who listen to podcasts while they're working out. And here's the kicker. Because of that connection where somebody's taking a break to spend time with you, podcasts build trust. When people hear your voice regularly, consistently, and they get in tune with it, this is why people trust those shock jocks. People trust the radio show hosts. They trust the voice in the morning when they would go take that long commute to and from work. And it's funny because a lot of people thought how working remote or working from home would destroy that opportunity with podcasts. Well, no, people want the same thing when they're at home. I know hundreds of people. Okay, I don't know them personally. I have seen their comments and how they've commented that they listen to a specific podcast every Sunday morning. I used to have a Sunday ritual. Side note, I used to have a Sunday ritual, right? When all throughout high school into my early 20s, my Sunday ritual was, and maybe some of you guys remember this or not, ESPN had a show called The Sports Reporters. I would watch The Sports Reporters and I would watch Meet the Press. So ESPN had Sports Reporters. NBC had Meet the Press. That was my Sunday ritual. For whatever reason, I just like to put those two together. I like the idea of hearing these people talk about sports, politics, sometimes, of course, business as well, business from different angles. And that was my Sunday thing. I've actually changed it up completely now with podcasts. Sunday is usually where I'm catching up on podcasts that I don't listen to in a week. So if an episode comes out Friday, I might not listen to it until Sunday. I might, sometimes if it's a show I try to get as much as possible, then I'll make sure I listen to it. But I usually do my catch up. And like I said, I found hundreds of people who did the same thing. And I was shocked when I go into comments and I find people like, yeah, my ritual is on my lunch break, I listen to these 3 podcasts. That's what I do. Because people trust the voice that they hear. They trust the message that they're getting. Whether it's true crime, comedy, and we'll get into the different genres. So don't listen to this whole thing about podcasting being too saturated. It's not. There's scary numbers. Scary numbers. And when I say scary, I mean scary when it shows how much opportunity there is out there. Between numbers from Listen Notes, Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, Apple iTunes, compilation report was put together. There are 4 million podcasts. Now, think about that for a moment. There are only 4 million podcasts. This is why I say it's scary. Many of those are inactive. In other words, somebody made 10 episodes and just left it. Somebody made 50 episodes, just left it. I was recommending a podcast that I love to someone. And I had to give them the caveat. I said, but she stopped making it 2 years ago. She has over 100 episodes, but she doesn't do it anymore. They're still there. They're still getting listens. And this is why it's a good opportunity for business. Especially if you're doing what you should be doing with your business and being consistent. Staying on brand. Focusing on the long-term goal. The podcast I recommended, it wasn't her business. It was just something she wanted to do. And it aligned with the business she wanted to start. So she went out, started the business, but left the podcast. But now people know her name because of that podcast. She has over 200 episodes. That's 200 episodes. This is episode 60 of the Ambition Show podcast. Okay. And the best part about it is it always opens up opportunities to fresh, young, unique voices. So if you're just starting out, great opportunity for you professionally, whether it's in broadcasting, it's in your small business, as an entrepreneur, but also if you have a lot of expertise and advice to share, wink, wink, like this one, there you go. It's an opportunity to find that target audience. And imagine, I just said 4 million podcasts. And the majority are inconsistent. Many of them are inactive. Inconsistent meaning they'll drop a show 1 month, 2 months later they come back with another show. Then they have 3 weeks of shows consistently. Then it changes up again. There's a podcast I followed based on, this guy did a great podcast on one of my favorite shows on HBO called The Wire. That was one of my all-time favorite shows on HBO. His podcast, he does an episode. I can't even give you the cadence. Because I remember one time he was dropping an episode every day. And then it stopped for like months. I didn't even go back to it. I see him pop up on YouTube. I started following him again. It was consistent. And then it stopped again and back and forth. Too inconsistent. There's a lot of opportunities out there if you can be consistent. And I want to start putting that in your brain right now, because that is the thing that separates everything from blogging, podcasting, social media, all of it. It all comes back to consistency. But frankly, podcasting is just a way to connect, another form of using content to connect. You got a voice recorder on your phone. If you don't, you can download it. And it's as simple as that. You can grab inexpensive lav mics, which are little clip-on mics, wireless Bluetooth lav mics, or you can get a more of a setup with a microphone like a Blue Yeti. But you don't need the most advanced equipment to get it going. And that's the best part. It's just you need to be consistent with a message and know who your audience is. Podcast has been around for a while. It ain't going nowhere anytime soon. And here's a list of some of the biggest platforms in podcasting. Platforms for you to produce and distribute your podcasts. So when we come back, we'll go over podcasting, specifically entrepreneurs in podcasting, see what they've had to say, get some of their feedback, and what can we apply for ourselves to get it going when we come back. Okay, so now that we know that podcasting is a powerful tool, let's talk about entrepreneurs that are using podcasts to grow their businesses. Now, the business itself might not be the podcast, just the vehicle, just the marketing channel. And that's what I really want to get to you guys today is that you have to keep in mind, it's about what the audience wants and what they absorb the most. So if it's blogging, it's blogging. If it's a newsletter, it's a newsletter. In many cases now, especially the growing opportunities out there, it's podcasting. And that's what we talked about in the first segment. Now we're going to go into the steps and the pieces to how it can help you. Number one, it can help you establish authority and thought leadership. As I mentioned, it's something about listening to a person every day, right? It's something about the power of their voice. It's something about the power of what they have to say and the conviction in which they say it. That helps. The best way for you to leverage and utilize this vehicle, hey, share client success stories. I know y'all get tired of my stories. I talk about the guy who sold shit. I talk about me and my 5 minutes of being a fitness instructor. Well, I wasn't a fitness instructor. I was a personal trainer. Don't give me no fitness instructor stuff. I'll fall out in the freaking class. I talk about meeting the first millionaire ever and how she broke down how it's important to build client relationships and sales. Right. And being a salesperson is just being a good consultant. Telling stories of your experience, what you learned, how you grew. And let's be real, your failures too now, your setbacks means a lot to build trust, an honest and authentic relationship, and then also how you overcame them in the steps and the skills and the knowledge that you may have acquired, or working with people who are knowledgeable in areas and how you connected with them to get to the point that you are today. That could be in anything. You could focus on your personal training business. You could focus on being a mechanic. You could focus on being an electrician. One of my favorite podcasts, I've brought this up once before. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to this day is all about project management. And my man has an entire segment where all he's doing is answering questions from other project managers. You can call in, you can do it just like an old school radio show. Right. And I say old school only because people were more comfortable with doing that in the past, but we still do this stuff. I've mentioned this multiple times. Nothing has truly changed. It's just new technology and new opportunities, but nothing has changed. It's still the same. So what's the next area? If you establish yourself as an authority, establish some thought leadership. If you're a personal trainer, every episode, a new workout, a new exercise, holding your audience accountable. Hey, what's the goal until the next episode? I'm going to ask you. Hey, I'm giving y'all free game now. I'm giving y'all free game. All right. So my personal trainers, I want y'all to write that one down. That's a good one. I used to do that with clients. And if I didn't want to keep doing personal training, I probably could have gone pretty far with it. Because the same thing as a consultant and anything else, you're holding people accountable and you're helping them reach their goals. Here's another good one. Let's say you have a podcast where you review products. Okay. Now, leveraging that as a revenue stream is going to be very easy. But how do you build trust with that audience? You post and share your reviews online. Maybe you do a little snippet review, but in the episode, you go through the thorough review and you break it down step by step. That's great for video too. You establish yourself as an authority and thought leadership once again. It's not hard. You just got to think outside the box and be a little creative. And this is why having a good team can help you out. But also listening to other podcasts and seeing what they're lacking, which I'll get into in a minute, is where you can really thrive. Next up is your content marketing and brand awareness. Okay. So these entrepreneurs are leveraging that to the fullest. They're using podcasts as a vehicle to reach new audiences. I've brought up the content lifestyle. You know what? Actually, that brings me back to something I thought we were supposed to do and we didn't get down to it. Check out, I'm going to drop a link to it. When this episode publishes, there's going to be a link in the caption of the episode to a content cycle. Basically, how you could take one piece of content and leverage it and turn it into other pieces. We're going to do that, and I'm going to put the link to the video up there. That's on our YouTube channel. But it can help you in building brand awareness, because you could take that one piece of content, this one episode of the podcast, that one audio. Now you have a transcript. You can turn it into a blog post. Now you have content that you can put into an email as for your email marketing. Now you can do as an SMS marketing and SMS messages. You have so many opportunities from just one piece of content. Once again, just thinking outside the box, be creative, and of course, working with the right team, people who can help you do this, helps a great deal, because it can grow your brand awareness with the audience that you're currently with, and they can understand more products and services you offer, but also new audiences. One thing that we did on my team is we took blog posts and made them into videos. Now, this is nothing new nowadays, right? But about 3 years ago, that's when I first really got into YouTube for other people. Like, I tried a few times myself, it didn't work out. And it didn't work out mostly because of my end, right? Not because YouTube is a bad channel or a bad platform. Just, I didn't have the message I wanted just yet. But the cool part is that I got to see from other people's vision. Oh, this is a way to leverage their content on YouTube, because they wanted to do traditional case studies. But I was like, hey, let's make some videos. So we turned articles into videos. And then from those videos, we had audio clips. From those audio clips, we could put together a podcast. So we kind of did it reverse engineer. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to drop a link to that video of where we make a content life cycle, or not necessarily content life cycle, but a content circle of life, if you will. A content circle of life. Okay. And it's show you how you can use that as content marketing, and a podcast can be the very first step of getting you going. Next up, and this is where I've seen podcasts help me the most right now, is networking and collaboration. I have some fantastic people that I've worked with, from video, audio, guests on the pod. It's amazing. It's amazing how just opening up to a new opportunity can open up to great, collaboration and meaningful connections. We got some feedback from a couple of some great podcasters and entrepreneurs that I've met along the way. And we're going to share that with you, because that's what it's all about. That's how you grow as a business. And that's why podcasting for entrepreneurship, or for entrepreneurs, is a great tool, is a great opportunity. Next up, sales and lead generation. Now, I brought up how one concept of a podcast, doing reviews and doing analysis, can help you, because you can work with brands doing that. But just in general, hey, check out the podcast. Here's a link. Check out this link. Bring it into the podcast. You could bring and create that sales funnel and that marketing funnel. So you're educating and adding value, while at the same time naturally building out leads in a database. Your listeners are being exposed to your business and what you do and your knowledge. And I'll be honest with you, even in that network, people that may have not thought about working with you before because they didn't know what you did, you reach out to them, you tell them, hey, this is what the episode's about. Okay, well, what's the whole podcast about? You give them the concept of the podcast. You give them the concept of your background and the concepts that you're trying to share with the world. They're like, wait a minute, you know what? I could work with you. I could work with that business. I could work with that agency. We've seen this. And don't just take my word for it, okay? Look at brands like Smart Passive Income by Pat Flynn, right? He had his business. His business was not the podcast, but the podcast has been leveraged into multiple business ventures. I've brought him up often one of the first, kind of one of the first podcasts for business I ever started listening to. But the very first regarding business was the Mike Dillard Show. Podcast no longer, it's no longer being produced. You still can catch the old episodes. But these are entrepreneurs who had businesses before and then building another entire business around their podcast by connecting their audiences with their thought leadership, with their network. Literally, because of the Mike Dillard Show, I follow about 5 people on LinkedIn who I have regular communication with, and I regularly connect with because they were guests on the Mike Dillard Show. 2 of the books that I've recommended and mentioned were from the Mike Dillard Show. Here's a challenge for you guys. Check out the Mike Dillard Show. I'll drop a link to the podcast and see if you can find the 2 books that became books of the episode. I would love to know if you guys can find those 2 books. Because one book I've suggested multiple times, and another book was one of the very first books I recommended. And it's been literally the game changer from the very beginning of my business. And just thinking and seeing things differently, and how to focus and pinpoint exactly how and why you're starting, what and what you're doing. But that's the best part about you starting your podcast, is how you can expose people to new ways of thinking, creativity, diversity, and even inclusivity. Because you expose their whole understanding. You expose them to a whole new world. And you never know who's listening. And it's not pulling them away from everything that they're doing right now to turn on the TV, fire up the laptop. No, it's right there in their phone. iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. It's right there. And they can catch an episode 5, 10, 20 minutes, maybe an hour. And that's another piece about podcasting before we get to what the guests have to say, is that long form content in podcasting, people are still used to listening to radio shows for hours on end, going back and listening, especially if your content is evergreen and it's not focused on just the highlights of that day. People will go back and reference it on a regular basis and listen to it all the time. I knew one person, and this happens a lot. You'll hear this a lot from people when it comes to podcasting. This is why it's important to be consistent and to keep going. I hear this almost every time when somebody says, I picked up episode 200, picked up episode 500, picked up episode 50. And then I went back to the beginning and listened to all the episodes. You will find a lot of people say this about podcasts. If you ask people about podcasts, when did you pick it up? I picked it up with this episode. So I went back to the beginning and listened to all the episodes. Happens all the time. This is a great opportunity for you to reach that audience and to share your ideas, but you got to be consistent. So you can establish thought leadership, you can build your brand awareness, you can build out a network and identify opportunities to collaborate, and you can turn that into either a stage on your overall marketing and sales funnel, or make this the key, the goal, the finish line of that funnel. Let's see what some of other podcasters and entrepreneurs have to say. Let's get into it. So first up, when we're checking in with entrepreneurs who've used podcasts or using podcasts right now as marketing tools or as part of their business, let's check in with Jessi. Jessi, welcome back to the show.
I'm great. Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm super honored to be able to join you today. Seriously, I know your podcast adds so much value, so thank you.
So what inspired you to start podcasting?
Yeah, so I was really inspired because at the time I remember really wanting to work from home, and I saw a lot of the options were with podcasters. So it really just fascinated me how learning how it's not just like record and done. It's like so much work before and after the podcast interview happens. So it really just inspired me to be like, hey, why don't you try it out and see how it is? And so that's really what got me into really starting my own journey of podcasting.
Great. And what platform did you use for your podcast?
Yeah, I actually ended up using, I think it's called Anchor now.
Okay.
And I released it to Spotify and the other platforms too. I really liked it because it was simplified the way they had the platform. It was easy to see the metrics and see how I can edit the thumbnail and the description. So I really like that they made it easy for me to just kind of publish it there and release to the other platforms.
So, what challenges did you encounter when you first started your podcast, when you first started running your podcast? What are some things that you encountered and some challenges you may have encountered?
Yeah, so a lot of challenges that came with it was besides learning how to actually like record and edit was really just I guess figuring out what my audience wanted and really learning to connect with them. That's when I realized that hey, I can use Instagram to like run polls, and it really just helped me to understand what people wanted to hear. Getting that feedback helped me, and also just practicing helped me overcome that challenge of like knowing what to edit, how to make it sound. So really just getting in there and practicing really definitely helped me to overcome those technical challenges and also my mindset of doing it.
Now, you mentioned Instagram. How did you use Instagram and how did it help you with your podcast? Because, people use different tools and different platforms. How did it help you?
So with Instagram, I really love that I was able to look back and see how many people voted on the polls and what people were leaving feedback wise, just because when you have a podcast, it's hard to get feedback because you just kind of put it out there and that's it. So really integrating the other social media, and I also use Facebook, so that really also helped me to get feedback from people DMing me like I really liked your last episode. A lot of people were excited to be guests on it. I was like, definitely I'll get to that, but I just was trying to catch my bearings of doing a single podcast recording. But definitely Facebook and Instagram were great tools for me to get that feedback. And I also used Trello to kind of help me organize my episodes, and then a little bit of Google Docs. I had just started out, so I wish I had known about more of the tools. Now that I know, there's so many more that I could have integrated, but definitely those tools really, really helped me to have that beginner friendly start.
Yeah, yeah, and that's you mentioned it a little earlier too, where you say just kind of test things out, and as things go, like you said, you've got more tools later on. But you worked with podcasters. What tools have you used working with podcasters to help them with their shows?
With a lot of podcasters I've worked with, I've seen that they've used Monday, Airtable, and I really like it because you can design it in a way that makes it a lot easier for anybody new or any new team members to jump in there and just see what's going on. So a lot of those tools, like I said, Airtable, Monday, and also I've found Notion has been a really good one also for kind of putting all that information in one place and then releasing it out. But yeah, I feel like those tools are really good. I personally like Trello because I like the Kanban view with the cards, but I know there's a lot of great ways to organize it that way with like Monday and Airtable too.
Right, right, and it's also I can imagine it's also based on what works best with that client that you may be working with and what they're comfortable with, which makes perfect sense. But and I remember you mentioned it before about Notion. I was saying how the virtual assistant I work with, she loves Notion as well, and Notion is an amazing tool. It's actually
It
uh,
is.
I think it's funny that I always look at Notion. I think this is what Microsoft Teams was trying to be.
Exactly.
It just couldn't do it for whatever reason. But Notion is really awesome. But I haven't tried Airtable yet. What can you do in Airtable? Explain a little bit if you don't mind. How Airtable helps with podcasters before podcasters.
Yeah, of course. Airtable, it definitely, I feel like it's a more like beefed up version of Excel just because you can add statuses a little bit. It looks a little more cleaner in there, and you can just kind of make your own form. Like for instance, if you want to have like a podcast column, the link to it, the thumbnail for it. So pretty much the same as Excel, but it's a little bit easier to view, and it's also easier to build because what I like about it is they sometimes already have like ways, like templates, but obviously you can build it to your system, and it just makes it easier for you to have everything organized. And I also like that you can bring on team members, which is nice because you can click to assign things to them. And so it's easy for them to get assigned to it and get like a little notification when there's a change or something needed. So it doesn't have to be like the old school, like I'm going to email you these changes. It's just like done from that same place, and then they get the notifications, which is really nice.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it's an easier barrier to entry. Some people challenge with Excel, which I can understand because they'll
Right.
get really super advanced, but it sounds like it's a more user friendly version, which can make it so much better because of the simple fact you're trying to produce a show. It takes a lot. Were you editing your own shows too, or were you just recording? Did you go out to an editor? How was your workflow?
Yeah, I did my own editing. I did my own thumbnails. I did my own research, everything, which I'm really thankful for because it gave me a whole new respect for everybody on the team that
Yeah.
is to put a show together. So it was really fun for me just because I got to like listen to my show and edit it and put it together and just put it out to everyone. But it was a lot of work. I'll admit that it was.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of it. I've worked here and there with when one of my team members isn't working on another assignment for a client, then they'll help out doing it. But I'm kind of the old graphic designer in me. Like I look at the thumbnail, like I could do it. And it's like, no, I need to focus on writing the script and doing doing the show, actually making the show, right? That's
Yeah,
one of those drawbacks of being an entrepreneur. You want to do it all yourself. Not good.
right.
Cool. So, what strategies when you were growing your show? What strategies did you use besides? Was there only social media? Did you use anything else to help, like advertising or anything else to kind of grow your listener base?
I definitely listen to other podcasts, not to copy them, but like as inspiration to see what
Yeah.
they were doing. But yeah, a lot of it really strategy wise was using Facebook and Instagram heavily on the stories. I was a lot on stories, just posting like behind the scenes video of like, okay, now I'm setting up for my next episode. I noticed a lot of that kind of content got a lot of attention. Like people were excited to see like, oh, what's it going to be next? So just teaching that and also making people feel like they were a part of it, I feel really helped me with, like I said, the polls asking. There was an episode I had done about just people's beliefs in ghosts.
Yeah.
Because
Oh wow. Okay.
and that one got the most attention. People were like, oh my gosh, like you should do a whole series on it. And your episodes should be much longer. Like, I want to hear more. So it really helped when I asked people questions on my polls on Instagram because people felt like they were part of it. And so it was just like finding more ways to make people feel like they're part of this community. And it's like not about me, it's about like them. And so I felt like that really, really helped me with strategy wise.
Oh, that's a really good point. Really connecting with that audience. Well, you said they were asking for longer shows. So what was your format? Like, what was it? Did you have guests normally? Was it just you? Did you have co-hosts? Like, what was your setup? What was your format for your show?
Yeah, so it was really just me. I believe only one of my episodes I had my sister come on, and it was like a story-based type of episode where we kind of exchanged stories. But yeah, otherwise it was just me, and it was really people wanting to kind of be able to like call in to it and like either leave a voicemail or leave their stories. So it was kind of more like story based, and so that's where people felt like, okay, I have a good story I want to share, and it was just kind of nice to get that feedback from them.
That's awesome. So it was automatically like working with the audience and kind of getting their stories already out there, and that you kind of built that relationship from the beginning. I like that. Like that wasn't just so much focus on you; it was more so focus on people you're bringing to the table. Awesome. And I think that's where a lot of people miss. I mean, I've had to work on that myself. Like my first episodes was bringing more of the audience involved and getting them more engaged and finding ways to connect with them. Besides just having guests on, just seeing what the audience was looking for and listening to what they had to say. So it's a really, really good mode. I hope people are listening to that. That's important. Like to bring the audience into it as soon as possible. That way you guys can start building out that relationship. And going to, building out a relationship with the audience. Now you've taken it to where you help podcasters. Was the reason why you help podcasters, was it because you started your own podcast? Like, how did that become a niche for you? And how did you, how did the podcast, you having your own, help you out with your business?
Yeah, so I actually really wanted to gain that hands-on experience, but I knew that since I had none, there was going to be probably not anybody who would want to hire me. So that's when I was like, okay, let me do my own thing. And I really learned a lot because it gave me that experience. And that's actually how I was able to get my first client.
Okay.
She was a podcaster, and she was like, the only reason I gave it to you, to be frank, is because you're the only one who had podcasting experience and the other virtual assistants didn't. So I was like, yes, that's good for me that I did it. So it really, really helped me set me apart. And from there, she just referred me to more podcasters. So I was perfect. I'm in.
Perfect. No, that's a really good point, and that's why it's really is smart to have like. There's nothing wrong with having a general knowledge of things. Like, I mentioned before, I work with a virtual assistant. It was because primarily worked with digital marketing agencies and specifically web designers. So that's why she brought on. But the digital marketing agency that she worked with at one point had a podcast. So same thing, it was because she knew that world, and that's really important to. Kind of like I say, have that general knowledge, but then take it into a niche or find a different niche within those areas because you have that hands-on experience. So do you only work with podcasters now, or do you have different clients in different industries? Like, how does it work with you and your clientele?
Yeah, I do have different clients. I mostly like working with podcasters just because I love that type of workflow, but I do have other clients like travel content creators and their coaches too.
Okay, nice. And would you because you stopped your podcast, right? You no longer have it. Okay. Would you ever like start it back up? Was that something you're thinking about doing in the future? Would you ever get it kicked off again?
I actually would. I definitely would. And I think now I would take it a step further with the video for YouTube, just because I know
Okay.
how powerful YouTube can be. So I think I'd probably take it a step further and do a video instead of just audio.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. So with that, I just wanted to be sure, you dropped some great pieces of knowledge, not only of just understanding the platforms, where to find your target audience, and how to really develop that audience. I loved what you shared about how you started off with the audience. That was very important. And I think more of us on the content creation side in general should be thinking about that. Any other, before we let you go, any other advice that you could share to someone who wants to use a podcast, to leverage a podcast for their business, or maybe make the podcast their business? Any advice that you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say definitely go for it. The first few episodes, just be willing to know that they may be rough, and that's okay. I know there's, a lot of fear around having it to be perfect, but honestly, there's so many people that are doing it with minimal equipment and they get better and better. So yeah, I would say definitely go for it. It's really worth it to have that platform. It is a lot more work, but it's definitely something that can help you with like getting your word out there. But really good for getting more clients because if you don't do video, that's fine too, but just at least the audio version of it can really help boost your business to get out there more. So yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to take messy action at first. You'll get better over time and just do it.
Awesome. No, great point. And I don't think anyone can hear that no one can hear that enough. There's no limit to hearing that. Just start. It's going to be rough. It's going to be tough. Like you said, a lot of people, and I remember this from working with musicians a lot, they really want to focus on everything being perfect the first time out. Like, no, you got to get through those, because that's how you identify what really works and what's perfect, is by getting through those work patches. It's just, you got to get your reps in. But no, that's fantastic advice with everything. And making sure, because I don't know if you're taking on new clients or not, but where can we find you? How do we find you online? How do we find you socials? Share what you got so we can connect with you, and so our audience can connect with you.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Jessi B Social. That's B with 2 E's, like Busy Bee. Yeah, you can find me there, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to work with podcasters and also other content creators as well.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jessi. Appreciate you once again being a guest on the show, and also just dropping like just the gems that you did, because I know somebody needed to hear that, hearing it from a person who's had a podcast. You've seen podcasts from different angles. You've seen what it can help as your business, but also being your business. And just as Jessi said, everybody, make sure you're listening to that. Like, just start. Hey, I'm an introvert. I say it all the time. I'm very shy, but I knew I had things that I wanted to share, and people kept asking me to share more information. connect with. I meet great people just like Jesse from a networking standpoint. They're like, we want to connect with people like that. Give us a way to do that. Think about the audience and kind of get out of your own mind for a second and then focus on helping the audience, just like Jesse did, and share some scary stories. Some ghost stories. Maybe you have some ghost stories.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Jesse. All right. Have a good one. And we'll be right back with the closing segment of the show. We're going to talk about the book of the episode.
Well, awesome. It was great to hear from a couple of our guests, past guests, future guests, and just kind of, how they've leveraged podcasting, how they've used podcasting. And really, that goes into just how to start a podcast, right? As a marketing channel, how does it work? What do you need to do? And I know that some of you guys out there, maybe, you maybe you've dabbled in it, because a lot of times, people have started and stopped. Called out one stat before, actually it was in our lessons learned episode at the end of season 2. And the average podcast stops at the 3rd episode. Now, that could be 3 episodes after, over 5 months time, 2 weeks, 1 day, doesn't matter. That's where the average podcast stops. That's why if you go into these podcast libraries, if you're going and looking up a topic, you'll find a ton of podcasts in there that are 10 episodes, 4 episodes, 5 episodes, 50 episodes even. But stop for one reason or another. All types of things happen. That's why it's important to know why you started. And one of the reasons why that book that Mike Dillard exposed us to, or exposed me to, when I first started listening to his podcast back in the day, was one of the first books I picked up. So, how do you start the podcast? Well, let's break it down like a fraction. First up, choose a niche and a format. Now, the key here is to identify the purpose of your podcast. And the format will help you in understanding how you want to communicate it, how you want to connect with people. And the niche, of course, specifically what area, what topic, what theme you're going to focus on. When I say format, because there's many different formats, right? There's the solo format, right? Solo episode, which is basically what we're doing right now. It's myself connecting with you, sharing a topic, having, a discussion or two, maybe in the comments, and we come back and we bring it back to a new topic, or we bring it back to another installment on the same topic. But this is a solo, kind of like what they consider, like if you're vlogging or if you're on TV, a talking head, if you will, right? But then you also have interviews, which we just got out of, where we spoke with a couple of entrepreneurs and podcasters themselves. And, they shared their stories and they shared, some of their insights. And then you could also have a panel discussion. Panel discussions are what you see consistently blowing up. I will call that out because it's great to see from different perspectives. Here's the one challenge I will say starting out with a panel discussion. You guys got to be on the same page. When I mean the same page is not necessarily we all have to think alike, act alike, nothing like that. Panel discussions require each person to focus on, hey, we're going to come here for a cause. Right? So thinking of it as TV news, when you see the anchors, or when you think of shows like The View, we're coming here for a cause. We're coming here to collectively together. And let's just be real. If you're not getting paid for the podcast, it's going to be kind of hard. It's going to be kind of hard for people to come there every single day, or, whatever the schedule may be. That could be a challenge. So that's why a lot of people start out with the solo episodes or just interviews, and then they evolve into maybe a panel discussion. But then there's shows like, hey, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has people on with him. But, to be honest, it's kind of like that one-man army in a sense, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Now, he has a whole team around him, and you can't get to that level without a good group of people to work with. And I'm just talking about the success of the show. I'm not getting into anything else. I'm just talking about the success of the show. I brought up Bill Simmons, Joe Budden. Like, these are the titans, if you will, the top dogs, right, of the podcast game. Although, keep something in mind. Joe Rogan, comedian, worked with, UFC for a long time. Joe Budden, clearly very famous, very well-known hip-hop artist, creator, also did reality TV and stuff like that. But started as a creator, as a writer, as a rapper, as an artist, and has worked in multiple areas of the field, but also as a broadcaster, which goes also to Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons has one of the, I mean, when it comes to blogs and sports, Bill Simmons has been in that game for a minute. And I say all that because not all specifically these three people, that's not where they started in podcasting, which goes to show you how podcasting can be a great marketing channel for your entrepreneurial adventure. It could become your main business, or it could just become an aspect and an element to your business. But you got to put that time, effort, and energy into it. And those three gentlemen have definitely done that. Bill Simmons is one of the most successful networks. When I talk about shows that have nothing to do with him in some cases, right? Shows he's barely on or not on at all. And he was very consistent with it and kept that going no matter what station he worked for, whether it was with HBO, ESPN, doesn't matter. Joe Budden worked with some major publications in arts and entertainment. Joe Rogan, once again, like I said, very successful comedic career, stand-up comedy. And they all have different formats. So what fits you and what fits your message is the key. And of course, I'm using those three, but there's hundreds of thousands of other podcasts that are making real businesses from their pods. Brought up Mike Dillard. Did a lot of consulting work, coaching, different products. Used podcasting as a vehicle, but he mostly focused on, or at least the podcast I caught, was mostly interviews. Because that helped with his message and connecting his audience with leaders, with thought leaders. Pat Flynn. Many of his episodes are one-man shows, but he's done quite a few interviews as well. And sharing insights and growth opportunities. And that's the key. What works with your audience? And I'm going to jump, before I go to the next pieces and next aspects of step-by-step breakdown of starting a podcast, go to specifically my podcast, this podcast, The Ambition Show. I saw, and I'm going to go right to it, I saw two opportunities. Number one, I would hear great podcasts with great insights, great information, great details, fantastic interviews. And this is why I push this in every episode, but you know what I never got? Here's what you do. Here's what I'm giving you to do. Take this information and do this next. Here's how this information is applied. It was, this is a bunch of information. Now what? Every episode of The Ambition Show, goal is two things. I'm leaving you with a book because read the book. The book applies to the theme and how you can apply what you've learned, what you've heard, what you've been exposed to your business, to your community. Here's a takeaway. Here's a tool, a resource. Every episode, whether it's something for your business plan, marketing, strategy, design, finance, accounting, here is a tool to help your business from this point to get to the next point. Because I didn't get that in every episode. What is your opportunity? That's your niche. That's your offering. That's your competitive advantage. Could you do it like me? Hey, I'm gonna put it out there. Could you do exactly what I do? No, you're going to do it the way you do it. And that's the key, to find the way you do it. Because even if you say you're doing exactly as I do, or if I say I'm doing exactly as someone else, I will never do it exactly as someone else. Ever. Neither of us will. We will always fail if we try to replicate everything someone else does. And you don't want to do that, because then you don't have a competitive advantage. You're just a copycat. And that's not what you're trying to be. You're trying to stand out. So what is the opportunity there? And does it fit a format that works for you? Which goes into equipment and software. Now, this will, and I do mean this is where you would have to get a lot more technical depending upon your format. If you have a panel discussion, right? There's a fantastic vlog. It's a podcast, but I only follow her vlog. I don't really go to her podcast. I follow her vlog on YouTube. She does these great panel discussions, right? All these people have social media platforms. I think most of them have podcasts, but she has a rotating panel discussion. Very, very well done. But it's all remote. That could be your panel discussion. So therefore, some of your technology and equipment might not you might not need a big studio or anything. But if you want to have people come in, you want to have sit downs, things like that, you want to look more like that Joe Budden piece, or you want to look more like what you see on The Ringer or something like that, then you may need a studio setup. But hey, I remember when I used to manage rappers for the short period of time that I did it. Yeah, I didn't work with nobody super uber famous, like, so don't start asking me about that. But when we would do our tours, because we worked hard, we were hustlers, we worked hard as entrepreneurs, music entrepreneurs. We went to radio shows, digital online radio shows, where people had the radio set up in their house, in their garage, in their basement, in their attic, or they would rent out a studio from an actual local radio station, for 1 or 2 episodes a week or 1 or 2 episodes a month. So there's many different ways where you can get this done. You don't need a bajillion-dollar setup. Right. One of my favorite tools is I like to say I create on the go. Right. Or, I make content on the move or on the go. I use Movo for a lot of my equipment, but I have other equipment that I use. One of the best things, if you have a really good smartphone, which pretty much every phone can do this now, has a good mic setup, you could download a voice recorder and record right from there. In fact, Podbean makes it really easy for you to record your podcast from your phone. Dropped a link about them a little earlier. Here's another link for you to check out. Podbean is a really good tool for you to record on the go and to make a podcast on the go with whatever equipment that you have. But there's some fantastic lav mics, vlog setups, so you can stay mobile and create your content as well. You got a link to a couple of those platforms that I've used and I recommend, as well as those that some clients have used in the past. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Next, you got to create a plan. Outline. And this is what I'll give you. Now, the best suggestion, we got this from Pod News. We've got this from Listen Notes and recommendations from some very successful and long-term podcasts. But some of them say outline 10 to 15 episodes. I would say outline 15 episodes, but give yourself the goal of 25 to 50. So outline the first 15, break it down, bullet points, break it down. Who you're going to talk to, what the episode's going to be about, what the theme is, when you're going to launch, all that stuff. But do it in chunks of 15. Because you want at the very least 25, if not 50 episodes saying, hey, that's my goal. Here's why. I brought it up before. The average number where podcasts fizzle out is 3 episodes. If you record 15, you're already breaking outside that mold. If you get to 25, you've put yourself in a league of a very, very few, especially if it's consistent, like every week, every month, every 2 days, every day, whatever it may be, every Monday, whatever. And then if you get to 50, more than 50%, you've surpassed more than 50% of the podcasts that are out there. That's the scary number. That's why we did at the end of season 2, going into season 3, I did the lessons learned. I was like, I got to 50 episodes. Do you know how many podcasts don't get to 50 episodes? That's crazy. And it reminds me of when people talked about blogs. Yeah, people will give up on a blog. It's like, yeah, but this is long form reading content. You can't expect it to happen overnight. So outline 15 episodes way before you launch, having a roadmap. So breaking it down, my production schedule, how you're going to edit, what days you're going to shoot and record, those types of things. Having that outline of step by step of what's going to happen in that episode, how you want to shoot it, how you want to record it. Once you finish that 15, get to recording. Just go record and start editing. And then outline the next 15 to 20. And I'll tell you why that number in a moment, where we get to distribution. Distribution and promotion. Now, this is the area, just like with writing a book, this is the area that people don't really want to mess with. They really don't. And to be honest with you, this is one of the main reasons why I want to focus on marketing my whole life. Because this is the area where creative people tend to be the weakest. Not because they can't be creative, because the time and the dedication it takes to this can take them away from being creative. Social media, email marketing, blog posts, transcriptions, posting and sharing, going to networking events. First, find out where you want to distribute your podcast, right? Now, the top platforms, of course, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. But there's so many more. Because keep something in mind. Amazon, Apple, Spotify, right? Even YouTube to an extent. Those platforms have a lot of other content going on. Audiobooks, ebooks, vlogs, just in general, different shows or documentaries, movies, music. People aren't only going there for podcasts. Here's a list of all these other places to distribute. Half of them, I didn't find out until I did some research before I started my very first go round with podcasts. Was on another platform before I used Podbean. But when I saw this full list, I was like, that's how I knew Podbean was the platform for me, because it was educating me about podcasts and which platforms are the best. Here are 5 platforms that if you are going to start a podcast and you're serious about it, especially if this is going to be your business, you need to be in tune with, you need to be aligned with. And I got all this information from working with Podbean, but these are great opportunities for you to find out the best ways and effective ways to market your business, or to market your podcast business, and to market your business through a podcast as well. And I find new podcasts from these platforms more than I do some of the bigger ones, because it's dedicated to podcasts. So check these out and then find out the best opportunities for you to promote your pod. Finally, monetization and growth. This goes into having that roadmap. This goes into having that plan, right? Knowing what niche to format, and then the content plan play critical roles in this, because then you'll know what fits best for me to advertise and promote. Maybe the podcast is not going to be a main revenue source for you, right? So you're not worried about advertising and putting in spots. That's fine. But once you start building out an audience, and maybe you want to build out your team, maybe you want to transition from that solo episode format to a panel, and you're going to need the resources to do that. Or you want to make sure that you have the revenue to support the podcast on its own outside of the others. Boom, there you go. Make a monetization plan. Whether you can try to focus on monetization through YouTube, advertisers directly. Here's another reason why I chose Podbean. Because it had an advertising network that was fully transparent about. That was critical to me. Because I was like, hey, if I'm going to make a podcast and people are going to advertise on it, why can't I try to get a couple of them bucks? and more importantly, why can't I try to work with those advertisers and be transparent about it? It took years for platforms like Spotify, like iTunes. It took years for those platforms to get on the page of giving more control to creators. Podbean came out the gate with that. So that's why I chose them. Which platform is best for you? We got that list of platforms. We have the list of opportunities. And we also have the list of different platforms to learn more about marketing and promoting your podcast as well. Check those out. Let me know what you think and drop a comment. Here's a few quick tips of success, and then I'll get to the book of the episode. Like I said, give yourself a test goal. I say at least 25 episodes. Outline 15, record, edit those, then outline the next 15, and then so forth. If you get 50 episodes out there, you are 50%. You're beyond 50% of all the other podcasts that are out there. The average podcast stops after 3. Average blog stops after 10 articles. Come on. Make a realistic goal, though, and start for realistic reasons. I want to share my ideas. I want to share my knowledge. I want to share my expertise. I want to talk about things that are going on in my community. I want to help elderly people. I want to help young people. You know, I'll get to the next two steps, tips for success. But I'm going to call something out real quick. People talk about these celebrities who are in podcasts, and I've heard so many people. I hate to say it, it's almost the same thing when I hear creatives complain or creators complain about AI. I hear about, creators complaining about celebrities getting into podcasting. You know how many celebrities got into podcasting and jump right back out? They didn't make another podcast, or they don't want to make another podcast because they were looking at it for the reasons that most people look at it. Oh, it's a great way to make some money real quick because people are throwing money at it. But the real money is consistency. Now, don't get me wrong. We have football players, basketball players who are getting into it. We have actors who are getting into it. But we also have a lot of football players, baseball players, basketball players, actors who started and stopped. They're part of those 3 episodes. They're part of those 50 episodes at the most, if that. Or they stopped and they came back at it a different route. Now, I name names as part of facts and statistics, not to call people out. And I'm going to do it here again. Let me give you a great example. There's a podcast called The Pivot with Ryan Clark. And you talk about established athletes who come on this show. You talk about an established group of hosts on this show. And there's multiple who are very similar in this regard. These are people who have something to say. They have a message. They want to connect with an audience. They want to communicate. They're not just there because, I'm done with this career. Now I'm going to start up a new one just to get into it because the money's being thrown at it. They literally have something to say. Every single host on The Pivot is a man with a story who's sharing that story. There's multiple podcasts by famous basketball players who are sharing their stories, but they're bringing on people who are also sharing stories, and they're also showing and connecting and bringing value to people. That's what you should focus on. Those are the ones who are successful. The ones with a story to tell. The ones who want to reach people. What's your story? What story can you bring to the forefront? What stories can you help the world see is out here? Get on WhatsApp and tell people and share it with people. Get on Facebook and tell people. Get on Instagram and share it out. Hey, check out my podcast. Check out my podcast. Check out my podcast. Which leads to those other 2 tips. I'm going to finish with this. Create the podcast based on wanting to create the podcast. Right? I see it as a marketing channel and a marketing opportunity. Great. I want to create a podcast for that. Not just I'm looking for something. This is specifically the channel that will work. I'm talking to people commuting. I'm talking to people who are at work right now, and I'm sharing advice. One podcast, if I could find this link, I swear it was the funniest thing. And I don't know why I didn't come to. I was like, this makes perfect sense. The guy was walking people through a step-by-step tutorial. And he mentioned why he did it as a podcast and not as a vlog. He's like, like I said, he said it and it makes perfect sense. If you're trying to fix something around the house, do you have time to look at the TV? I was like, dude, that made so much sense. If he got a podcast just giving you instructions on how to fix stuff around your house, I'm going to find that link and I'm going to send that to y'all. It just came to me as I was thinking about this point. And I was like, I only listened to one episode because I wasn't fixing it around the house. But I was listening to different podcasts. I'm like, what? I'm like, he's telling me how to do this in the kitchen with the. And I was like, okay, let me check out his YouTube. He didn't have a YouTube. So I went to the notes of the podcast and he just like, hey, this is what he does. This is what he produced. It's like a handyman podcast. But it's like, do you have time to watch TV while you're fixing something? I was like, dude, you're so right. And that's my point. He was thinking about the audience. And he's getting his message across. If I lived in that man's neighborhood, I probably would have hired him. Well, he was actually in a big city. that I'm nowhere near to. But once again, I probably would have hired him. Okay, because he knew what he was talking about. He had a bunch of episodes to do it. I don't know if he still. I'm gonna find that link, y'all. I'm gonna find that link. If somebody knows what podcast that is, it's a handyman. I'm serious. If somebody knows, it's a podcast with a handyman going through instructions of what he's doing and how he's fixing something. The episode, I know, right? I'm going on a whole other tangent, but I want to know that podcast because that was a freaking great idea. Anywho, the last point, make smart goals for your podcast. Break it down like a fraction, like I love to say. Break it down into smaller goals. Outline my 15 episodes by this many days, right? So I'm going to give myself a week. I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. I like to look at it in months because this is the way it works out like this, right? So if you make a SMART goal where the first week you do your research, you find out your format, you come out with your outlines, all that good stuff, right? But you outline those 15 episodes. Because of what you've done in that first week, the next week is acquiring the equipment, setting up your wherever you're going to record, right? If you're going to have a host, talking to the host, you guys get on the same page with everything, with the scripts and whatnot, right? After that, you see where I'm going with this? After that third week, the goal is record and edit. Just knock out those first 15 episodes. That final week is let's see how our publishing, our marketing works, right? Maybe we hadn't a plan in the beginning, but it has to get adjusted. That happens a lot. Maybe we thought this social media platform was going to work, but it didn't work out. But now that you've gotten that a month of everything done, boom, shakalaka, move on. Now, do we keep this going? Let's outline another 20 episodes, maybe another 25 episodes. Maybe we see we need another host. That's a good one. And that happens. I hate to say it. Maybe you identify we don't work well together. Maybe you need to adjust the topic and the theme a little bit. Realistic goals in a realistic time span. So with that, come back with the book of the episode. It's kind of obvious what that book is going to be in this episode, but yay, nonetheless, when I come back. Okay, now everybody, so we went over some basic tips of success. Then we got the breakdown out of the way. And thank you once again for our guests for joining us and sharing some insights and their quotes. And also just, their experience as podcasting, whether it be for their business or podcasting is their business, doesn't matter. It's good to see it from different angles and to see what fits into you what fits in your world. Because honestly, you may say, hey, I want this to be my business. I want this to be what we do as our main vehicle, as our main instrument. This is the new aspect of our business. Maybe not. Who knows? What to read? Brought them up multiple episodes. I've brought this book up in a past episode. Superfans, the easy way to stand out, grow your tribe, build a successful business by Pat Flynn. All right. For those who weren't around in the first season, I brought up Pat Flynn before. Pat's story resonates with me because he came from an angle a lot of young entrepreneurs come from. A lot of young entrepreneurs specifically. I'm going to say how this affects everybody, but I'm starting off with at least the young entrepreneurs because those are the people who, especially with the generation, whether you're millennial or even Gen X, you start out on a path thinking a career was the way to go, and that's the way you're going to grow, and that's everything. But then you see, hey, I want to create. I love what I was learning, but I want to create, I want to connect, and I want to build my own business. So you see entrepreneurship. Now, what a lot of people say, I will always correct them. Entrepreneurship is not a career, it's a lifestyle. And that's because those people, and I put myself in that generation, definitely in that group of people, but part of that generation specific as millennial, that we had this idea that the career was the life. And what Pat brought up so many times started out in architecture. He started a blog about architecture. He started to write about architecture. That man ain't no architect right now. His most successful work in business has been helping other entrepreneurs how to market themselves online, how to build businesses online, the different tools to do this. And when I heard his story for the first time on YouTube, I was like, that's almost exactly what happened to me. Now, luckily, before I even went through college and, finished anything with law, because law school is where I really wanted to go, I had the beauty of meeting lawyers. And the feedback I got was like, that's not the life I want. I don't care how much money I'm making. That will not be happy. That will not be happy. Oh, Lord, y'all. I will not be happy. And if you're living a life that you're going to work, oh my God, a job that you hate every single day, you're feeling you're feeling confined, you're feeling like you're not yourself, that's going to get bad quick. That can get really bad real quick. So I didn't even want to go down that path. Meeting with lawyers, understanding what they did. So I did what I wanted to do. Learned everything about, as much as I could at the time, especially about marketing, but specifically digital marketing, specifically ways to build brand and tools to use online. Picked up learning, all kinds of skills, graphic design, branding, iconography, how to create fonts, logo design, marketing communications, everything. Consuming as much as possible. And I noticed I got a lot more enjoyment out of doing that. Now, what's the best way for me to grow, to stand out? Seeking mentorship, seeking advice, and always along the journey, always along the way, connecting with, as I call them, virtual mentors, connecting with virtual mentors. And then when I'm at a point where I'm now working a job, don't really care for it, I'm listening to books, I'm listening to, on my commutes, I find this one. I was like, I like this guy's story. I heard him on YouTube in an interview, and I was like, oh, he has a podcast. I listened to Mike Diller's podcast. I listened to another podcast before that. A podcast that was by a history professor talking about mythological creatures, right? Those were the two podcasts I would listen to regularly. Mike Diller's and this other podcast, right? Then along the way, how you get suggestions. I see Pat Flynn pop up. Heard about his book. I like Superfans. I just like the title of it because you want that. You want those brand advocates. And what he broke down in that book, broke it down like a fraction, was exactly what I tried to get to every single client. I like, this man is speaking my language. Not only does his story resonate with me, but he's speaking my language of how to connect, of how to build a tribe, of how to build a successful business based on being authentic and connecting with people. This is why I tried to get to every musician that I worked with, every entrepreneur I worked with. You don't need to have 1 billion people. You don't. You really don't. Because when you have that loyal following, they'll follow you. And this is why I'm connecting it with your podcast here, people. Because if you've done the work to build followers from whatever business you're doing right now, accountancy, you're a lawyer, you're a mechanic, you're a baker, you're a doctor, you're a marketing strategist, doesn't matter. Web design, doesn't matter. Cafe owner, doesn't matter. If you've built that loyal following, if you built those connections and you're genuine, you're authentic, they will follow you. They will follow you. And you make the barrier of entry very low, very easy to cross over. Everyone has access to YouTube. Your podcast needs to be on YouTube. You got one? It should be on YouTube. You don't need the biggest, the fanciest equipment on the world to get started. You just need to be authentic, and you need to make sure people can clearly see you and hear you. That's it. It's that simple. You need to get a podcast going as soon as possible with a low startup. Podbean is a great platform. That's why I recommend them. Not because of a sponsorship or an affiliate. 100% wholeheartedly being genuine with you. I was on 2 other platforms. I mentioned this before. 2 other platforms. Actually, one platform I actually got episodes off. The other one I didn't even get started with. There's a lot of tools out here, and that's why I created my show. That's why I created my platforms, was to help entrepreneurs leverage technology, leverage these tools that are out here to help them grow, help them succeed. That's my professional purpose. What's yours? Great. Write that down. Write down what's your professional purpose. How can you get in on a podcast? How can a podcast help you connect with that market? And yes, I'm going to take credit because, hey, this is what I believe in. But I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the lessons in Superfans will help you understand to where you live what I just said. But more importantly, you live your truth and what means and what matters to you and what it means to you. Fantastic book, Superfans, The Easy Way to Stand Out, Grow Your Tribe, and Build a Successful Business by Pat Flynn. Can't recommend this book enough. I won't recommend it every episode because it might not align with everything, but I will recommend it as much as possible. Did you write it down? I want to see it. Did you write it down? Did you write down your professional purpose? Great. Now, write down, type up if you have to. Podcast. How does it align with a podcast? Do I need guests? Do I need a panel discussion? Do I need interviews? Can I do it as a one-person show? Do I need to be on the streets? What do I need to do? Because now you're going to start out that outline. Now the outline becomes easier. And what will help you complete that outline, grab the book. Link to the book in the description of this episode. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this one. And we have a couple of tools for you, as always. Have a template for you to make a script for your podcast. That's one of them. And I also have a link because I mentioned before that we were working on a lot of digital products. And we've got a couple of digital products up at some of our marketplace stores. Check them out. Now remember, if you join our community, which we're building out, there's going to be a few things that you can have access to, not only early, but for that lovely, lovely price of free. Okay. So anything that's on the marketplace, you will have access to not only early, but you also have discounts and you also get it for free. But that template is yours to download right now. Go get it for free and start working on those podcast episodes. So now you have the book. Now you have the professional purpose written out. And now you have the outline of what you want to do with those first 15 episodes. Now you have a template to start scripting those episodes. If you have a co-host or if you have guests, there's versions of the same template, right? So it's perfect for you to get started on. This is not, and I'm going to call this out right now. I have no problem saying it. This is not made with ChatGPT. This is not made with AI. This was actually crafted by a fantastic copywriter. Okay. A fantastic copywriter who worked with me to develop a podcast script. And it evolved over time to where I'm using it. I'm only sharing what I believe in. I'm only sharing what I use. It might not be helpful at my business in every stage, but I'm helping. Like every recommendation we've given you is either not only myself tried and tested, but also clients' recommendations that I've also tried and tested. Same thing with the books we've all read. And when I say we, I mean team members that, the great people that have worked with me to help me grow and help my business grow. So with all that being said, y'all, you've got the tools. That's why I said this is the purpose of the show. You've got the tools. If podcasting is a great way for you to market your business and grow, don't let it pass you by. In 3 episodes, get beyond that. Break that average. We need to bring that average up. Because it could have just been that person maybe, or those people didn't find the right niche, or they didn't find the right co-host, or they had a co-host and it didn't work out, or they weren't able to get guests, or they didn't need guests. But it's hard to tell from 3 things. But then also makes you wonder if it's right for you. If you're saying this is right for you, you've got the templates. You've got a fantastic book by somebody who's been there, done that, lived it. You've heard from a couple of people who they've made podcasts, they built podcasts, they crafted it, they developed it. And they share how it helped them and how it helped them grow, or, the opportunities it presented them at the time of their business. Now you have an opportunity to make an outline to get those first 15 episodes done. And you got a script to script them out. Check out the additional tools that we've developed for podcasts, everything from a planner to templates for thumbnails, templates for social media posts to make it easier for you to succeed. And I'll leave you with this. Take one step at a time. Follow step by step. Never forget your why. Don't forget, drop a comment if you can find out which books Mike Dillard Show. Mike Dillard Show, which books I got from Mike Dillard Show. I've given you multiple hints, but I would love to know if you find them out. With that, y'all, thank you for joining me, Era Muhammad, for another episode of the Ambition Show podcast. Podcasting to market your business. Get it off the ground. Get it going. And if you already have a podcast, y'all, hey, join our community on the website. Let me know your podcast. Let's get the conversation going. Let's get it cracking over there. Until the next episode, best to you and your loved ones. Peace.